same battle for European manufacturing. Thanks for France. Okay. You hear me also without the microphone, maybe, but the microphone is better. Okay, so first point which comes to my mind when I've been asked to chair this section is immediately my mind came to Robert Schuman. Robert Schuman, in the famous declaration of the 9th of May 1950, which is today's Europe Day, posed the basis after the 5th anniversary of end of World War II in the declaration in order that make war will not only unthinkable but materially impossible. And he created the basis for a common market for coal and steel. And this started the integration of the European Union. And immediately it came to my mind, but sovereignty is a value by itself. Today, we know that it's a value. We know that if we go back 3 years before the pandemic, we had a hope that globalization could bring a better world, probably giving back manufacturing to China and service to India. We had the hope to create a better world. But then what's happened has caused us some problems. We discovered that we were not able to produce the face mask for our people, that we were not able to produce chips for our cars. And then after that, an insane war has caused problems for energy and wealth. So as a conclusion, we can come that sovereignty is a value today, but we don't have to forget Robert Schuman lesson. So after this very quick introduction, I leave now the word to Ulla Ungelmann from the European Commission, Head of Unit Industrial Forum, Alliance and Clusters of DG GROW. Ulla, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And of course, I couldn't agree more with when you're citing Robert Schuman. And also, we have the Robert Schuman place just very close when you come out of the train station. So it's for somebody working for the European Commission, you feel immediately at home, nearly like at Brussels with the roundabout of Schuman. So I would want to bring the perspective from the European Commission, in this case DG GROW, being responsible for the internal market, industry, entrepreneurship, and SMEs. And what I would want to bring it into perspective with the Industrial Strategy Update, which was published in May 21. And put it then also in perspective following the war in Ukraine. And then from the Industrial Strategy Update, which was needed because the first industrial strategy which we had published was just in March 2020. And so we needed to update to include the lessons learned by COVID. And the basis of the industrial strategy is a transition to green and digital, by at the same time seeing that our economy is resilient, and for resilience you need also the sovereignty. And part of the industrial strategy are what we call transition pathways. And these transition pathways, of course, have also a very strong technology block. And I'm quickly explaining these different transition pathways. But let's first start with the Industrial Strategy Update. As I said, strengthening the single market, resilience was one of the key lessons after the COVID crisis, because unfortunately the first reaction was to close down borders And so we needed to create green lanes. We needed to see how can we make sure that the goods and also the people can circulate. But also looking at and addressing the strategic dependencies is part of this industrial strategy, and then the twin transition. If we look at the resilience of the single market, because the single market is often taken as something given, but we really have to work on it. We have to identify the barriers and work on them. And therefore, when the crisis hit, we created what is called the Single Market Emergency Instrument, where we got together the member states and we were really working on solutions, as I said, like the green lanes. How can we help the single market to function? This has proved quite useful, and that's why we are now proposing to get this to a more permanent structure, and that's why we are proposing the single market instrument, where we can then really discuss with the member states on what is needed. But also we should see how we can deepen the single market, and particularly exploring the harmonization of standards. And we have published recently a new standardization strategy. We have put in place a chief standardization officer in the Commission, who is our new, who is our Deputy Director General, Mai Verute. So we're really taking this standardization very serious. And at the same time, we were strengthening market surveillance, because this is another thing about products arriving in Europe. And then, of course, at the same time, we need to monitor what's going on in the single market. And we apply the lens of industrial ecosystems. So we have 14 industrial ecosystems at which we look, and particularly when the crisis hit, we were looking in each of these industrial ecosystems because they were affected very differently. One of the most hit was tourism, but other ecosystems needed to be particularly looked at: health, mobility. And therefore, so there are these 14 industrial ecosystems, and with them we are publishing an annual single market report where we look into how are these industrial ecosystems evolving and what has changed. And also what we are looking into, the strategic dependencies and capacities. And in the first single market annual report, we have identified 137 dependencies. And if you look at the colors, you can see, of course, the biggest block, without surprise, is the dependencies with China, 52%. But we have also, let's say, with other countries, strong dependencies. But we looked at the dependency both ways. We have also certain products where others are dependent on us. So it is important to look at both ways. And then we were also looking what is a strategic capacity in some technologies. And here you can also see where there's a green arrow, something which we are seeing in a lot of sessions here, the advanced manufacturing, which is our strength. But we need to do everything to keep this strength. We need to maintain the strength. Batteries is in the middle. We are catching up. We have the European Battery Alliance. Hydrogen, catching up. We have an alliance. Solar, we know that we have lost production to China, but we have the new solar strategy also as a result of the Russian invasion. So we are here now also coming up with a solar alliance. This is really something where we want to work and move it to the green side. The cloud and the semiconductors, we also have alliances put in place. We have the CHIPS Act, so also there activities are going on to try to move this in the right direction. Additionally, we have created in DG GROW a supply chain task force where this has been put in place right after when the Russian aggression started. So we are really pulling together the expertise on what is happening in the different industrial ecosystems, what are the supply chain disruptions we need to tackle, And we do a bulletin, which is also shared within the European Commission and feeds also the discussions of our president. But it is really important that we know where the problems are, where is the loss of input, where is the loss of market, and then also how can we help European businesses, but also how can we help Ukrainian economic actors and the displaced population from Ukraine. So it is not only looking at the effect for European businesses, it is also how can we foster cooperation with Ukraine. And we use different sources for information, what comes from the industry associations, what comes from the industrial cluster networks, the Enterprise Europe network, the member states authorities, but also our delegations, Ukrainian authorities, and of course exchanges with other EU institutions. We have now this bulletin, which I have just mentioned, made it public, not the full bulletin which we are preparing for internal use, but the information on what's happening in the different industrial ecosystems. This we have made available, so I think that could be also of interest for some of you. And I'm not going into detail, I just want to show you this is an information where we go by ecosystem and feed then where are the issues. But also we are very much interested to hear from you. If you detect issues, we are, let's say, really interested to know as much as possible how we can help there. Then part of the bulletin is also how to accelerate the transition to green, digital and resilience. So looking at the lessons learned, and this, as I said, was then feeding in the updated industrial strategy. I'm not going into detail, I just want to give you a flavor of what we are doing. And what we are using to do is the Industrial Forum. The Industrial Forum takes, is a composition of, it's set up as an expert group of the European Commission, and that's why it's unfortunately very limited participation. But our aim is to have it as inclusive as possible, and that's why apart from the members, which consist of the authorities, the economic ministry of the member states, plus business organizations, but also some SMEs, some NGOs, some trade unions, we have a wiki available for the Industrial Forum where we put all the information which is discussed in the Industrial Forum and in the different working groups so that everybody can follow, but also comment and provide feedback. And this Industrial Forum is then also working on the transition pathways. And for the transition pathways, which is an actionable plan on how to really succeed in making the transition. And there, with the Industrial Forum, we said we need to look at different building blocks, sustainable competitiveness, regulation and public governance, and there particularly the issue of permitting came up, that the permitting times are far too long, the social dimension. So then what probably interests you the most, R&I, techniques and technological solutions, but also the infrastructures, the skills, particularly also re- and upskilling needs, and investment and funding. And for this, we have with the Industrial Forum created a blueprint for these transition pathways where all the different ecosystems can use it. We have put questions in, so the ecosystems can use it as a guiding tool to look at their transition pathways. And tomorrow we will have Industrial Forum meeting, which takes place 4 times per year, and also excited the first time in person. And there we also want to look what are the effects of the war on the transition pathways. And we are working very closely also with our colleagues across the Commission, and in this case with our colleagues from RTD, on the common industrial technology roadmaps, because they play an important part in the transition pathways, and particularly for the energy-intensive industries where the low-carbon technology are highly relevant, but also in others like textiles, construction, where we are working together and seeing what are the technologies which can be used and which are important for the development of the transition pathway. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ulla. The next one is Stephanie Mittelham, Manager Energy and Environment from Orgalim, the European Technology Industries Association. So, Stephanie, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurizio. I see the slide in very small. Is it normal?
It's correct because it's like they are doing it.
Okay,
from
no
there,
problem.
so
No problem.
Will you survive with this?
And to change,
It's changing over here.
but I don't see the content.
No,
here.
you don't. Actually.
Okay, no problem. I will turn myself. No problem.
Super. Thank you.
Good afternoon to you all. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you. Thanks a million to the organizer for inviting Orgalim to present during your session. In my presentation, I will briefly introduce you to the association Orgalim, and then I will give you the key messages from Europe Technology Industries, first on research, development and innovation, then on the importance of standards, and then I will also present to you our key messages on a very fresh proposed new, very important initiative from the European Commission, which is the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation, which will make in practice products become the norm in Europe, so it's really very important. And last but not least, Maurizio asked me to focus my speech giving you concrete examples from the technology industries. So I will be more quick at the start of my presentation to have more time to present you the examples at the end. So briefly, Orgalim represents Europe's technology industries, providing innovative solutions which are underpinning the twin green and digital transformation. And our industries are comprised of a lot of companies, more than 700,000 companies, which are innovative companies spanning the mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, electronics, ICT, and metal technology branches. And together, all these companies represent the EU largest manufacturing sector, generating an annual turnover of over 2 billion euro and manufacturing 1/3 of all European exports, and last but not least, providing more than 10 million direct jobs. We have different types of members. Sorry, I can't change the slide anymore. It's not working, sorry. I must have pushed on something wrong, sorry. Anyway, we have different types of members. We have, first of all, national association members coming from different countries. And for... No problem. Technology. You see the importance of technology.
And the operating systems does not come from Europe. So we are not so relying on that.
Okay. I'm not the IT guy.
No problem. No problem. We'll find a way to make it work. No problem. Et voilà, super, thank you. No problem, thank you. So we have different types of members in Orgalim. We have, first of all, national association. And for example, one of our next speakers is from the Swedish association member of Orgalim, Teknikföretagen. So we have different members. In France, we have two associations. Since we are in France, we have FIM for the mechanical sector and the association FIEC for the electrical sector. But we also do have sector association members representing particular sectors. And last but not least, since recently, we have also a few corporate members. So what are the Orgalim key messages on research, development and innovation? I will just give you the high-level key title, not showing you all the details. You will see them in the slides. The message number one from our industries is that if we want to be sovereign, we need to invest more in R&D. We are clearly lagging behind China and US, and this is really a problem. And you see on the slide some concrete recommendations from our industries on how to get there, and I'm sure you will get a copy of the slide, so I'm speeding up to have more time for the examples. Key message number 2, Europe has a scale-up problem, and this was also mentioned this morning in the plenary session by Mrs. Johanna Drake from the Commission. That's the key message number 2. Again, we have some concrete recommendations on how to get there. Message number 3, and I think we will come back to this topic in our panel discussion later. Sovereignty is okay, but international collaboration remains key. Message number 4, Europe needs to address the shortage of skilled workforce. And last message number 5, invest in what we do the best to keep our competitive edge, advanced manufacturing, which was very well presented by Ulla in the previous slides. It was one of the first things on the in green that Europe was doing well, so I was very happy to hear that, Ulla. We have a slide with some useful links to our latest publications related to R&D. And now moving on to standards. So standards are, of course, very important for technology industries. Our industries represent key voluntary contributors, both to the European standardization and also to the international standardization system. As you might know, more than 90% of the funding for standardization comes from the private sector, and our members are major users of harmonized standards. The key messages and priorities from our industries regarding standardization. First is that the focus of our industries is operational. It's very important to ensure a fast approval of harmonized standards. Second, to have a transparent decision making. Third, the technical quality requires diversity in expertise. And last but not least, the importance of interoperability and international competitiveness. And here again on this slide, you have links to all our position papers with much more details. Now moving on to the sustainability and circularity main topic of this session, I will tell you a few words about this proposed new eco-design regulation for sustainable products. It's not the right version of my presentation, but no problem, I will move faster. So this new regulation from the Commission has been published end of March in the context of a sustainable products initiative package. And the main objective of this package is to make sustainable products the norm. And how will the Commission do it in practice to make sure that all products from different industries will be really circular and sustainable? They will come up with new mandatory requirements on very important green parameters, which I'm sure you all heard about before: durability, reliability of products, reusability, upgradability, repairability, presence of substances of concern, energy use or energy efficiency, resource use, recycled content, environmental impact, including carbon and environmental footprint. And there will be also an increased focus on product information via a new digital product passport that will be established for a few products that will be regulated. So in a nutshell, this is a slide about the benefits of the digital product passport. So this will be a passport that will track the life story of a product along its value chain, enabling services related to its remanufacturing, repairability, reuse, resale, second life, recyclability, and new business models. And it will be beneficial not only to manufacturers to create products with digital twins, but also to citizens that will scan on an app all the characteristics of the product so they can have access to relevant and verified information. And it will also benefit the market surveillance and customs authorities to improve their work. And as you might know, market surveillance is really crucial for the industry, so we are very happy about that. In a nutshell, our industries welcome the proposed new regulation for sustainable products. We strongly believe it will be a win-to-win for the environment and the economy, making benefits of digital solutions like the passport. We support a lot of things with the principles: contribution to circular economy, a functioning internal market mentioned by Ulla before, level playing fields, ensuring effective enforcement, eco-design instrument, a product-by-product approach, harmonized requirements, and of course the potential benefits of the digital product passport. As always, there is a but. With the industries, we are very supportive, but a few things concern us. It's how it will work in practice, and in particular, the digital product passport. The number one worry of our members is the protection of confidential data. They are really worried to give on a golden plate to their competitor all their trade secrets. That's the main worry from the industry in a nutshell. You can see more details in our new paper, which we promoted during a recent webinar where your colleague Ulla, Mr. Michele Galatola, kindly presented the new regulation, and we had different speeches. If you want to know everything about this new regulation and digital product passport, the industry view, NGO view, please listen to the recording of our webinar and watch all the slides. So, moving to some concrete examples of case studies. In the framework of the French presidency, Orgalim has published a Technology at Heart publication focusing on example from France. I have a few printed copies with me in case you're interested. First, a case study from Schneider Electric, a well-known company, describing how global energy management and automation, how they are deploying their technology solutions and digitalization to help the French food giant Danone company to extend the life of its plant, saving materials, carbon emissions, and energy consumption as a result. Next example is from the company Legrand, again French, and this study highlights practical eco-design issues in an industry where safety and durability are paramount and demonstrate the tremendous potential of enabling technology and digitalization. Next example is from a company called Cristal. They produce cookware maker. They are cookware maker producer, and they have developed an innovative process and service model enabling to refinish customers' non-stick pans whenever necessary, saving tons of metals and CO2 emissions. Another company called CMD Gears. This example underlines how service models can create the incentive to continuously improve resource efficiency and highlights also the role of digitalization in enabling predictive maintenance and reducing downtime. And we have further examples about enabling technologies. I will not read all the details, don't worry, Maurizio, but just to mention. So one example is about smart building management, which can increase operational energy efficiency up to 30%. We have another example about electrical cables that enable the electrification of Europe. Another example about variable speed drives that can reduce up to 40% energy consumption when applied to an electrical motor. Another example is about hydroponics. I never heard this word before we were doing this fact sheet. We learn every day. That reduces water use for crops by 90% compared to conventional soil-based systems. Another example is about advanced water leak detection that can reduce water consumption by 15%. And one of the last examples is about water treatment plant that can save 15% in total energy consumption. And the last example is about flue gas scrubbers that can also save some energy. That was it. If you have more, if you need further information, I will be there after the session. And thanks a lot for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Stéphanie. Next is Sophie Muller. I hope to have the right pronunciation. It's not Müller, I think. Yes, Director of Collaborative Research and Technology Studies from Thales, well-known company I don't have to introduce. So, Sophie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Maurizio. Yes, thank you very much for having invited me to this very interesting workshop, or not workshop, but presentation. Okay, so on my side, I will ask the meaning of sovereignty and what does it mean for Thales. I will present you that, and how does the company concretely manage the concept in domains like digital and semiconductors. So my presentation will go through, firstly, a very brief introduction of Thales, what is sovereignty, and how to manage, as I was saying, in digital and semiconductors. Okay, so Thales, we define ourselves in terms of we think we have some missions, and our mission is to serve our customers, customers that have big ambitions, and among which make the world go round. What are those customers? They are mostly governments, institutions, cities, companies. And what do we do for those customers? We are covering what we can call the decision critical chain, coming from gathering data through sensing, many sensors, transmit and of course, store those data and process those data to help making decisions. And we do that in 5 main domains of activities that are ground transportation, space, aerospace, defense and security, and digital identity and security. And not only we address those different domains, but we address different environments going from the bottom of the oceans, of course, going through what is on the ground, but also going to the depth of space and cyberspace. And if we want to sum up all of that in one sentence, we help customers master decisive moments by providing the right information at the right moment. And how do we do that? Firstly, we have 2 main features in Thales. We can say we are a powerhouse in R&D, and also we have a strong responsibility engagement. We have many collaborators, more than 80,000 in 70 countries, so we are a global company. We are spending a lot in R&D, 1 billion euros per year as self-funding, which doesn't mean that it is the only part of R&D we are performing, and for an average sales amount in 2020 of 70 billion euros. And we have invested a lot of funding during the last 5 years in digital, in key digital technologies. We have spent 7 billion euros to support our performances and know-how in connectivity, big data, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence. And we are recognized about our corporate responsibility that we consider as a strategic choice, is key to business performance, in ethics, in environmental and social responsibility. We have been awarded in several frames. And also to illustrate a little bit about what we do in R&D, we have a Nobel Prize. Albert Fert, who received a Nobel Prize, was awarded for a Nobel Prize in 2007. We have been 8 times winner of the part of the top 100 global innovators by Clarivate. And we have an extensive intellectual property portfolio, and we are covering a broad range of technical domains from science to systems across businesses. So, but now we come to the topic of today. What is sovereignty? And what formulation for Thales? Because there are many ways of understanding sovereignty, depending on the people we are speaking about that. I report on a very recent formulation by our president, Patrice Caine. For Thales, it is not autarky, but it's more autonomy. It means we can master our destiny. We consider ourselves as sovereigns insofar no others can decide nor influence our strategic choices. And from Thales mission's point of view, we can see that it is really very important in the two domains which are linked, digital and semiconductors. And yes, for sure, sovereignty is really at the core of Thales activities. It's part of our DNA. It's very important. And to master as much as possible, there are 5 key points we consider as very important. Firstly, before speaking about techniques, about competencies, patents, and so on, the first important point is our capacity of analysis and foresight. Of course, second point, the strengths of R&D. The way we organize our relations with players, with other players, the fact to be vigilant on value chains, and also, last but not least, about the talents. About the capacity of analysis and foresight, what we want to avoid is, of course, inadequacy in strategic positioning, lack of preparation, and situation of dependence. And this is why in Thales we dedicate a lot of effort in performing analysis, scrutinize evolutions, tracking weak signals, so as to be able to anticipate the future, to make sure we will not miss any important turn. And I will comment that kind of analysis on semiconductors in a few minutes. Second point, the strengths of R&D. Our ambition in Thales is to become one of the global leaders in key technologies such as cybersecurity, AI, and connectivity. And we manage so as to get a critical size toward this goal. In Thales, we are more than 1/3 of our collaborators involved in R&D, among which, so it is 33,000 people. Half of them are in digital, and 10% are on advanced technologies. This capability of autonomous research is also compatible with a collaborative approach in R&D, also called open innovation. We have been part of hundreds of this kind globally, worldwide, and we have partnerships. We have partners very numerous with academics, with other industries, among which numerous SMEs. But there is some points we are very cautious about is to do that with common values, respectful of regulations, and also, of course, in alignment with our strategic interests. And for us, all of this is a way to grow up also key domains of excellence. We have, for example, we are known for the tubes for space, for example. Oh, yes. Also, the fourth point we want to, not the fourth, the third one, is the way we organize relationships with other players. And I will put together that with standards. All of these are topics of dependence, of mutual or interdependence. In digital, in Thales, we make sure to establish relationships in a fair and balanced way with other major digital players. For example, we have had agreements with companies as Microsoft and last year with Google's. But we do that in a certain way. We bring technological bricks, such as on cybersecurity. We are both suppliers and customers. And in the contrary of decreasing our sovereignty, for us, it strengthens us. Okay, yes, I will go quickly. And in semiconductors, there are many, we can observe many different kinds of dependence links that have been built. Whatever, there are mutualization, complementary schemes, also standards, and to give very quickly some example, for example, when you need very specific components that are not mass-produced, you can have advantage to establish, to mutualize with other industrials. We have 2 examples of that kind in Thales, with Linred. It is a joint venture in between Thales and Safran, and also United Monolithic Semiconductors, which is a JV in between Thales and Airbus Space and Defense. And also, we also can observe, for example, the case of ASML, who is specialized in lithography technology. They have opened their capital to 2 major customers that are Intel and TSMC. It's a kind of cooperative. They have put links together. And there are other examples of that kind. About standards, what we can say is that, for example, ARM is a standard, and it's a threat. What we see is that it is a threat, and recently we observed that NVIDIA wanted to acquire ARM, and it was prevented by legal authorities everywhere in the world because it was a threat. On the contrary, what we observed is that DODs, like in US, they have promoted widely open source hardware, open standard like RISC-V, probably to get free from GAFAMs about that. And we in Thales also are promoting open standards in RISC-V in a very pragmatic, open and collaborative way, so as to get this independence as we observe others are doing. Okay, so first point, the value chains. We are of course very vigilant about value chains, both on what we are producing and also what we are purchasing. We dedicate a lot of effort to follow that, and we are not only careful about software or algorithm. We are working very closely with semiconductors industries, of course, European ones, mostly. And of course, last point, the talents. We invest a lot in the recruitment and reinforcement of competencies in a context that we all know of a growing competition. We plan a recruitment of 11,000 collaborators in 2023, half in digital. And of course, we will continue to dedicate a lot of effort for training. Okay, so I don't know if I have time to describe a little bit about semiconductors. So what kind of problem do we meet about semiconductors? We see that it's a problem of supply and demand in a situation of shortage. So the question is about how will the scarce resources be allocated? Will it be a fair or unfair competition about prices, preferences? Or will it be de facto a monopolistic situation? And I can say you that we strongly prefer regulation mechanism. What can we say about that? What we observe in the case of vaccines against COVID-19, we acknowledge the actions, good actions of EU about setting a market frame regulation so as to favor better conditions for acquisition at European level, but also preventing for a real mess in between, because this action has allowed homogeneous distribution according to needs to each member state. And so this is really beneficial. And what we can say also is about regulation in case of shortage. 3 methods appear. The first one is prohibition, it's like it is for drugs, for example, or rationing, taxation, the third one. And this last, what we observe, it's that it fosters technical progresses. What you mentioned just before show that. Other reflection about what we are facing today with the shortage. In the case of semiconductors, this is very, very complex in terms of value chains, more than vaccines. It's like, if we want to take an image, it's like a lace, robust in global, but with many weak points. Sometimes we are only at global level 2 or 3 actors, sometimes SMEs. What we are currently, the attention today is focused on large-scale investments, which we depend, and then probably it's good to focus on large-scale, but there are other weak points. And we are facing several types of disturbances, geopolitical situation, of course, climatic perturbations or accidents like fire, or accident applying on concentrated industrial areas as it occurred for Fukushima. And of course, we have the economical question, the prices, the conditions. And when we accumulate the risk, it becomes complicated. So it's nearly the end, sorry. So for us, to avoid being dependent, we think on several possibilities or mix. Creation of interdependent links, open standards, for us at least, multi-source approach, reduction of specific parts to have wider parts in common with big markets like automotive or telecoms, domains of excellence, and a little bit of autarky. So, as a conclusion, I will say sovereignty means staying vigilant, always. And then no total free exchange at global level. Economically more effective when everything goes round, but lying on a total confidence postulate that is not established. And today, even less than yesterday. This is why Thales wants so much to support a trustable world. This is our motto, building a future we can all trust. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Sophie. And well, I absolutely quote the statement, no autarky, autonomy. I think you catch the point. Next is René Penning de Vries, chairman of Photon Delta from the Netherlands and former CTO of Philips. So he will speak about photonics, quantum, and so this technology of the 21st centuries. René, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So what I will do in the couple of minutes that I have is explain to you that there is a new technology on the horizon that could well be one of these sovereignties, one of these areas where Europe requires strategic autonomy. And why is that? The technology is not yet established. There's not a single country or a single company or a single entity that dominates the market. Rather, it is Europe who has all the cards in its hand to make it a success. So much has already been said by previous speakers, but as my friend always said, not just by me. So I'm going to repeat some of that. And now I need to deal with this guy as well. Yeah, here we go. Now, this is a complex chart, but I want to explain it anyhow. The progress that we have seen in our world, in cellular, in digitization, in cars, in almost any aspect of our lives, is very much determined by Moore's law. And Moore's law was the paradigm that every 2 years, the digitization increases by a factor of 2. It becomes cheaper, it becomes better, it becomes more efficient. If you compare today with 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it's a totally different world. And that is this axis, Moore's law. Every 2 years, there's a new generation of technology. And today we are at the 5 or 7 nanometers. The initiative in Magdeburg, where Intel is going to do an 80 billion investment, relates to the ambition that Europe has to acquire this technology. We've seen it in the previous slide. There's another angle that relates to adding more functionality to the same chip. But still, it is about integrating it on the same piece of silicon. These little nice silvery chips that you have seen. Now that paradigm comes to an end. This is becoming too complex and also reaching physical limits. And this guy is getting too complex. Adding more and more technology in the same piece of chip is almost not doable. So the paradigm in the semiconductor industry is changing, and that is not just homogeneous integration, but also heterogeneous integration. And it means that, that a solution of tomorrow is not going to be one piece of silicon, it's going to be a package in which you'll see best-in-class solutions. We have memory, and we have FPGAs, and we have GPUs, CPUs, all kinds of functional elements that you just select because they are best for your particular solution that you want to acquire. And next to that, and that's my pitch, there's going to be photonic integrated circuits that deal with photons instead of electrons. Anytime that you transmit information from one continent to the other, or even within a continent, or even to the home, the information goes through photons, through fiber, into an electronic function. So we are dealing with a computer, a phone, that's all electronics, but the underlying information is always passed by photons. And the pitch is that if you can change the photonic technology, so you allow to do functions that today are in the electronic world and the photonic world, you win in speed, you win in power, and you win in energy usage. So if anything that today happens into the electronic domain, if some of that can be done in the photonics domain, then you have really a big, big advantage. Now, so photonic integrated circuits. So if you do that, rather than making them as separate components, then again you benefit from what we have learned in the semiconductor industry. So you get cost reduction, very significant. You get smaller solutions, very attractive. You get reduced power consumption. And very importantly, your reliability increases big time. We spoke to Facebook a while ago with their big data centers. As no joke, they have 3 data centers to perform the function of 2. So if one of these data centers breaks down, then Hub immediately they bring on the 3rd one to provide continuous operation. So reliability of a data center, can you imagine? These are huge buildings, and we just put an extra one in case there is a reliability problem with the other 2. And this type of technology, so if you bring together the components in one single photonic element, then you get increased reliability. We benefit basically from semiconductor manufacturing, and not the large scale that you've seen in Magdeburg, that you see here in Kroll, or that you see in Taiwan. It is fairly sizable industry. It is, for those who understand this, it's gallium nitride, it's silicon carbide, a specialty technology. But you use the same machinery as is being used in the standard semiconductor industry. And that brings communication. Today there's already a lot of stuff, all the continent to continent, all the fibers. Sensing is very, very quickly emerging in the medical domain, but also in food and agriculture. And last but not least, computing. Imagine that you could compute with photons instead with electrons. Then you have a totally new opportunity space. But in any case, quantum will be done with photons, very likely. So if you have these photons that act as qubits, then you have to communicate them, and that happens again with photonics. Very narrow, well-defined, transmission lines. That's the word I was looking for. The market is there. You talk about 60 billion in 2026 if you add all those. It's fairly small today. It's very fragmented. So it's not a single entity that you can understand. But if you add them up, we talk about 60 billion, and that's no piece of a cake. I said that this type of technology is going to be needed for quantum technology. Now, this is a little bit of a nerdy slide, but it tells you that in quantum technology, if you need to have quantum random number generations, multiplexers, frequency comps, key distribution, all these fancy things that you need to build quantum applications will be enabled by photonics. So if Europe has an ambition in quantum, and not just from an intellectual point of view, but also from a manufacturing point of view, this is an underlying and necessary technology. And we are, supply chain. We spoke about supply chain. This type of technology, I didn't mention LiDAR. LiDAR is an element that big time comes back into the advanced cars. You cannot imagine that again, in the next generation of crisis, we would not be able to create our own LiDAR devices. So supply chain, if it comes to photonics, is not defined yet, simply because it's such an immature technology. It's an emerging technology, I should say. But if as Europe we want to not be hurt by a next supply chain issue, then photonics is an area to be looking at. Worldwide, it is a very, very empty space. There is some companies here in America, Infinera, Lumentum. They create the data center-like solutions. So you come with a pipeline, glass fiber, and you want to have a computer. That in between is done by these companies. But you see how very empty it is. There is a France initiative, 3-5 Labs. There is some work being done in Great Britain, no longer part of our community. Fraunhofer, Smart Photonics, and here even in Asia it is pretty empty. Now it's not that it will remain empty. To them it's a matter of focus, a matter of priority, and they have not yet concluded that this is the area where they want to be. But this is the space where we are today, and it's very, very marginal if you come to semiconductor dimensions. 3-inch wafers. Now in semiconductor we have 300 millimeter wafers. 6 MPW runs, very, very small. And yet the companies who are using this technology for their prototypes are a very significant company. Effect Photonics is valued more than $1 billion because they claim to have a solution in the communication space. Now, Europe is very strong in this technology. It's not in any technology, but this technology. So here we have ranked the research positions for the Netherlands in this case, but if you would add up Europe, here we have Netherlands, Germany, France, Spain, Italy. If you would add us up, and don't see this from a Dutch perspective, but from a European perspective, we are very credible in our ambition to become the world leader. I'm a Dutch guy. I'm very happy to have a lot of support from my government. So we started this initiative, and the work started with Philips and university work back in 1990. So here we have a lot of basic work being done. It was supported by 250 million for the national agenda. Recently, we have our National Growth Fund proposal, 1.1 billion, which is 1/3 public. No, 1/3. Yeah, 1/3 is public, 2/3 is private. 1/3 is government, 2/3 is industry. And of course, we hope to be part of the European Chips Act. We are mentioned in the documents, by the way. We hope to be to participate from this CHIP Act, because if you want to make a next step, then it has to do with creating a sustainable manufacturing entity. So the R&D it's not okay, but it's certainly covered pretty well. And if you add the European initiatives, that it is very sufficient. But manufacturing, the strategic autonomy requires a little bit more. Photon Delta, so I'm representing Photon Delta here. So we are not just looking at research, we are looking at the supply chain, financing, market, human capital, it was mentioned before. So all the things that come together to make sure that we create a sustainable effort on this technology. We do the entire thing, and not we as Photon Delta, but we bring together companies who do everything from design to markets. And you see a number of companies. There's Fraunhofer, there is DNO, there's IMEC. We should, by the way, I'm not sure whether we have any representatives here, but we should find relationships with our French colleagues. But this is what we try to do. It offers an opportunity for Europe, and not just from an R&D perspective, but also from a manufacturing perspective. This is all very serious, but at an industrial scale, it's all very peanuts. So if ever we want to make a difference, then why not put all the eggs in one basket here and really make it a success? And it's not billions, eh? Semiconductors, Intel, TSMC, that is billions. This is hundreds of millions. Still very sizable, but it is manageable, let me put it that way. So, what did I try to explain to you? The Moore's paradigm is changing into a heterogeneous integration paradigm. So it's now much more how to bring together the best components rather than integrating them in one single chip. Europe has a pole position in the arising area of photonics. And that's based upon a lot of intellectual and industrial heritage. But if you look at the IP, if you look at the research contributions, if you look at the startups actually, we are really very well positioned. If we want to get strategic autonomy, which is more than intellectual leadership, then we need to step up. So I was pleased to be invited over here, because I think this is the forum where we discussed about those elements. So my last question is, are we ready? Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks a lot, René. Very interesting, especially for me, which are very interested in photonics. Okay, last but not least is now Cecilia Worrell. Cecilia, you have a very long CV. So I will just say that you are the Director of Industrial Research and Innovation and Manufacturing and Program Director of Production 2030 and Chairwoman of EIT Manufacturing. So welcome here, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Maurizio. Good afternoon, all of you. Nice to be here. Let's see if my shortened slides, since time is getting shorter and shorter, works. There we go. Let's see. That's the one. Okay. So, waking up in 2022, industry has really changed, and I'm going to talk not leaving the finite small particles of photonics going up to manufacturing industry is sort of what I'm going to be talking about. Large things like trucks, machines, tools, that's my space. It's an interesting time for industry. I think most of us can acknowledge that. Waking up after the COVID crisis, then there is a war now in Europe, which is a terrible thing. And I think all of us in industry and who are associated with industry have been quite rattled. The supply chains from just 3 years ago that you mentioned are no longer there. Talking to friends in Swedish industry, getting supplies from Asia is a complete lottery today. And that brings us back to sovereignty. And then there's new industries arising, like carbon-free steel and the battery section, which I will be coming back to in Sweden. And you've some pictures aligning this. This is the Northvolt factory in Skellefteå in Sweden. When we talked with Peter Karlsson and his gang behind Northvolt some years ago, they were trying to raise 4 billion euros, and a lot of people were like, that's not going to fly. Well, it flew, and there we go. And this is also bringing a lot of suppliers, new suppliers from Europe and the world to Sweden. So sovereignty is an interesting topic. The green steel is a big and interesting new industry in Sweden. We have the situation with the Suez Canal a couple of, more than a year ago, brought us a lot of trouble. Everything from IKEA was stuck on that ship. So that brought Sweden a lot of headache. And then the semiconductor situation that we all talk about today. So that's kind of my onset. And then we have the ambitions, the connection to the European Commission with Fit for 55 among many, many other initiatives. It seems to me being sort of 1 foot in and 1 foot out from what Europe is trying to achieve and also pushing us from industry to do. New initiatives and aims are coming out almost daily, which is good because I think the industry that I represent, more than 4,300 companies in Sweden, to mention a few, are really answering up to these efforts from Europe. So we are now here, 2022. We have a couple of more years before we hit 2030, so we have a lot to do. Looking at the industry challenges, they're innumerous, I would say, but some of the more important ones are here, and they were here a couple of years ago, also before the crisis. Just to understand the dimension of these challenges, the new photonics industry is small and growing, and it will be super interesting to follow. Manufacturing is the opposite. It's been around since the Middle Ages. Today we have about 2 million manufacturing companies in Sweden. more than are part of Orgalim actually, and they supply jobs to 30 million people. So it's a substantial part of the European economic landscape. And what are this sector, what is troubling them, what keeps CEOs awake at night are still issues that were there some years ago. To be able to be very flexible, because that's what the customers demand today. It's a technological, very tricky area. The human-machine collaboration, it's been an item on the engineering agenda for decades, but now we have the cobots and we have digital twins, even carrying data on our bodies, which is creating new challenges for industry. Resource efficiency, of course, is on top of mind. How can we manage to produce what we want to produce? Products, services, the whole production system, being connected with minimum use of resources. Like Northvolt was saying the other day when I met them, we want to make batteries out of batteries. So that's kind of the paradigm today, which I think is interesting. So the manufacturing industry with this image is really pushing its own boundaries, which I think is really cool, and I'm very proud to be part of this industry. Data, digitalization, connectivity is only just rising into this industry. The technology is there, but it has to be implemented. We have standards and many other obstacles. And then, of course, increased electrification, and then skills and talent, which I will come back to. But we know that things are moving, and I'm a bit biased being Swedish here today. That's part of one of my hats. And just to show you a little bit where we're at. Northvolt is mentioned by me today and probably many other sessions. Up and running, the first batteries have been delivered, which is something that I think has blown a lot of minds. The unmanned truck in the middle, I don't know if you recognize it. Anybody seen it in the news who are in here? Who knows what it is? My Swedish friend, yeah. This is the first product made of fossil-free steel. It's manufactured at Volvo Construction Equipment, and there's a long line of companies lining up to buy the next lot of steel. And the plant, the large-scale plant has not been produced yet. Einride making autonomous trucks running on batteries, super low weight. As I mentioned, the carbon-free steel, we're seeing this emerging. The need is huge. The lower picture in the middle is actually borrowed from Daimler, who are setting up the complete digital connected factory in Sindelfingen in south of Germany. This will be mastering digital tools, connectivity, and super flexible production, where everything moves autonomously. This will be fun to follow. And then a fun new product that is emerging is the autonomous lightweight shipping. It's still only smaller boats, but this is a company called Candela from Sweden, and they have not been sleeping either, but being super innovative and raising capital both in Europe and in Sweden. So we'll see where they're headed. I know that they're pitching their boats as channel shipping in countries like South Korea and many European hubs. So we'll see them more and more, I believe. Coming back to what some earlier speakers talked about, the investments from Europe in our day of change and dual transition. So this is a little bit of a map of what's out there for industry. The push towards climate neutrality is really big, and I hear it from companies all the time. They're many times surpassing the legal goals or the legal reference frames that are out there. First, digitalization has reached a bit of a level in industry. We're not there, we're far from finished. Now the next problem is entering the arena, which is cyber attacks hitting companies all the time. And also, companies' systems need to be interconnected. Interoperability was mentioned. It's still a huge challenge for the manufacturing industry. Nowhere near a solution yet. So many, many people, probably Thales is also working on this a lot. So that's where we're at that situation. And of course, we're dependent, like has been said, from many, many items outside of Europe. But this is depicting a little bit of what is out there to support industry. the lower map is RIS hubs. It's a part of the EIT manufacturing landscape where test beds and innovation hubs around Europe are being connected in the same framework. So you can find all of these hubs where new technology, digital technologies can be tested in real life when you visit EIT manufacturing. So that's really interesting. This is really out there, and you can really tackle these hubs with problems such as interoperability, standards, connectivity, human-machine collaboration. Another important buzzword coming from the European Commission and coming also from industry itself is the ability to build ecosystems. And I think that nobody around today goes to work thinking they can manage on their own. So you have to build ecosystems. And a friend of mine at AB Volvo, which is Sweden's largest company, said, well, our motto at Volvo is, we need to get married and divorced a lot, just to get the culture of meeting and greeting and then going to the next guy or girl all the time. But building ecosystems, there's also a great network around Europe that I think is underutilized, which are the digital innovation hubs on the right-hand side. There are hundreds around in Europe, and look them up. They might be able to solve technology problems for you more than you realize. There's another way to look at the maturity of digitalization and smart factories for manufacturing around the world and in Europe. And one of these, because we like to measure things in Europe and know what's out there and have good foresights. This is a map from the World Economic Forum, which I know some of you here are well aware of. They describe lighthouse factories. Some of you might have heard about this. Lighthouse factories are factory sites that are fulfilling a lot of the Industry 4.0 paradigms, using connectivity, being able to have digital twins, interconnectivity in their factories, machines and so on connected to internets. My thought looking at this map recently is 2 million companies in Europe in manufacturing. Not many are on that map. Probably some companies that were mentioned, some examples that you mentioned are here, Schneider Electric. In Sweden we have Sandvik Coromant and Johnson & Johnson, 2 factories. But this sort of tells me we have a lot to do, and just echoing what others have been saying, that industry needs to really pull its weight, invest more in R&D is so important. But this gives you a sense of where the whole world is at, and from my perspective, Europe is not doing that bad, on the contrary. So, the European efforts towards sovereignty, the new industrial strategy was mentioned. I'll just bring it up again because I think it's really, it's an agile way to address a lot of the industry challenges that are out there, focusing on just the right items. How do we reach green transition? How can we really exceed global competitiveness and become much more digital? Because this is essential to be more climate friendly and reach the goals of the 55% less carbon. Let's see, I'm going to skip some pictures so we have more time. Another big challenge for European industry, and you have to forgive me for going through this quite fast, but I'll spend some minutes on this slide because getting skilled and reskilled is a new possibility, because every company, every organization, I think, is struggling with both getting talent, reskilling and upskilling what they have, and then retaining them, because everybody wants software engineers and the likes today. So how do you sort of keep them on board? And quite new, I think this is very interesting to have a close watch from, especially from the Commission. Upskilling and reskilling initiatives using digital platforms. And this is coming out at a time when millions and millions of people in Europe have been working out of their homes using Teams and whatnot, Coursera, for example, depending if you're a student or if you're working. So the sort of the tacit skills of people out there is now established, I think. And it's a perfect timing to offer now courses online. And these are not MOOCs. This is high quality training. On the left picture is a program or a platform called Skills.move. It is a part of EIT Manufacturing as well, where you can find, I don't know how many, 20, 30 short courses on different items. 3D printing, how do I deal with standards for robotics? How can I learn about digital maintenance, for example, smart maintenance? A lot of practical skills are out there, and I think they're quite cheap or almost also free of charge. So Skills.move is available. You can look it up online. Not all the courses are running all the time. It's quite a new initiative, but I think it promises a lot, and it can really enroll thousands of people over the years. To the right is a Swedish initiative, which I think fills a role here. It's called Ingenjör 4.0 in Swedish, and it's also an upskilling and reskilling initiative. It has a little bit of a different paradigm compared to Skills.move. The Ingenjör 4.0 is a qualitative courses from 13 Swedish universities assembled on one place. There are theory classes, theoretical learning, and practical learning, because we also have a mobile lab that you can order if you are a company, for example. So already about 100, 200 engineers have taken the courses in Sweden from our big multinationals, and they're very giving us a thumbs up, which I think is a good sign. And the tradition, I think overcoming learning at the job is very important these days. Giving all your staff a couple of hours per month to learn will make all the difference. And all of this is available online and to a little or no, very low cost. So I know that this, even though it's called an industry conference, the ones of you that are here are maybe not all of you from industry, but some are. And just to give you a very, very small view of all the initiatives that are out there for industry, ranging from research programs to initiatives within EIT Manufacturing, Boost Up conferences, professional training, awards and seminars. There's I4MS, which is part of the Made in Europe program, etc., etc. There are digital maturity assessment tools that you can take as a company, and this picture could be 1,000 times larger, but just a flavor of what's out there, and reminding that this is done for industry as well. So there are a lot of things that are underutilized. I know there are some complaints about oversubscription on the research funding side, but besides the research funding, there's a lot more to take home from industry. So get on board, and all of these platforms have been designed for you. And that was my last slide. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Cecilia. So we have covered a lot of different topics, technological topics, political topics. So now we come to the last part, which are the questions. I would like to have the privilege to pose the first question. Hello, Ulla. Sorry, Ulla has to take a train. So thanks a lot for your participation. So let me pose a bridge towards the next session, which will be AI on manufacturing. In 2017, Mr. Putin stated the nation that leads in AI will be the ruler of the world. So I think that the goal in Europe should not to be sovereign to rule the world. So this is the first point. So in this point of view, I would like to pose to the speakers the question, how do you think that the openness and the sharing of technology can be really useful as a peacekeeper? So partly globalization has been a peacekeeper, but autocracy can be exactly the opposite. So we often speak about open science, open technology, and I think we don't have to step back from that. So we need to be autonomous, but we don't have to close. So this is my opinion, and I would like to have also the opinion from the speakers. I don't know who of you wants to answer, and then we will open the, to the audience for probably one or maybe two questions. Who wants to say something? Don't be shy. René.
Yeah, to me, it's not about owning all, being how to say that, being you need to be master of your destiny. I think our the example that the CEO of Thales just gave was very important. But you need to be in balance, so you cannot afford to be in a weaker position than another party that you have to work with. So if you have some specialties that you completely own and your neighbor has complementary specialties that, by the way, you both need, then you have a good basis to work together. But if you're just too weak compared to any of the other big entities, be it China, be it the United States, be it you name it, but if you're too weak, then you're not in a position to negotiate. And I think we should step away from that naive belief that we're going to be protected by our friends. Our friends are in Europe and nowhere else, I believe.
Thank you. Cecilia.
Yes, and just to follow up, Sweden, from my perspective, is a small country with 10 million people, and there are many small countries in Europe. And our economy depends on export and trade. So we cannot make anything in the Swedish economy without export. The batteries that I talked about just now, 97% of its content comes from outside Europe. So we need to trade a lot. And I was at a dinner recently sitting next to a Korean guy who was now the CEO of a new Korean company putting up a factory in Skellefteå in northern Sweden. So we need those kind of relationships all the time. And I hope we trade more with the world rather than less. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. I'm happy to complement what you just said, that we depend on export. It's exactly what I wanted to say from Orgelim. Some messages from the technology industry. So sovereignty is important and a value, as you mentioned earlier, but there's always a but. International collaboration remains key. And we believe it's crucial that Europe works towards strengthening the resilience of its industrial ecosystem, including on strategic supply chain like chips, but it should not go the protectionist path. Global supply chains and markets are an essential asset for Europe technology industries. As just mentioned by Cecilia, our industries are highly dependent on exports. For example, for technology companies, up to 80% of their turnover comes from outside of Europe. And most future growth will also come from outside of Europe, so access to these international markets remain critical to the success of Europe. And the same goes also for imports, not only export, but also imports. The products are highly complex, often using hundreds, if not thousands of components. To be competitive and resilient, we must be able to source these components with the best quality and price wherever they are produced. Europe will never become self-sufficient in all of this. We will therefore continue to depend on markets outside of Europe, at least for part of our supply chains. And since the start of COVID, our companies have been very successful in adapting their supply chains to make themselves more resilient and less dependent on supplies in market. And sometimes this has involved bringing supply chains closer to home, but mostly it has been about diversification of supply chains and sourcing from market. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Okay. Any questions from the audience? Andrew. So, okay, I know you, but we did not agree on the question. We have to say, otherwise. Please, Andrew.
Andrew from Ireland. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much. Andrew from Ireland. Great session. Really enjoyed it. Well done. I have a question for you, Sophie, maybe for others, I'm not sure. How realistic is it that the investment that we're making in the CHIP Act in Europe is going to have any impact on our ability to make chips for ourselves at a commercial level? What safeguards are in that system to not have this leave the European Union once it gets to a certain level? Do you see how this makes sense in a realistic fashion over the next 10 or 15 years? Can you justify it? And I would like to say, while I am standing here, René, you said one thing that I laughed at. Why not put all our eggs in one basket? That's not the European way, but good efforts, good chance. Good chance.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so, okay, probably Thales have to give an answer, but probably René also you have to say something about specialized chips, maybe. So, Sophie.
Yes, I am not a specialist in myself, so what I just observed is that we were not resilient enough in view of what we have gone through in the very short term, and what we will face in the coming years with climate change, with many things. We really need to improve our resilience. And after, for the details, for what we have to do, I am not the specialist, but I'm sure it's a good thing in itself to think having this effort, this strong effort at European level.
René, you want to say something?
First of all, on the eggs in one basket, and of course you're right, but there's one example, I'm a little bit of an optimist, there's one example of the opposite, and that's IMEC. I guess you all know IMEC. IMEC is the world best known institute if it comes to R&D of semiconductors, but in the meantime much bigger. 3,500 people, and Samsung, TSMC, Intel, they're all there. The one institute in Belgium, and it was about an hour's drive from Philips. At Philips we thought we could do it ourselves, because when those guys started, they were just a couple of professors, and they won that race. And I think it's fantastic. That's a very nice example of everything in the same basket and yet being successful. That's one. Secondly, on the success of the manufacturing ambition in Europe, I think you have to say the main part of the circus today come from Taiwan. Taiwan. There's just 1 hour's fly from China. So what's going to happen there in the next 10 years, 15 years? You can predict that 50 years from now, Taiwan is no longer autonomous. I'm not a politician, so somewhere there's going to be change. And all the manufacturing today is TSMC's. So it's a big amount of money in Magdeburg, and they will struggle, but I think we have no choice. We need to do it to make sure that we do have a control of our supply chain.
I have also a possible answer. If you look at the company which were before in the slide of René, like Lumentum 26, they still produce a lot of final part of their chips in Asia, but they continue to keep control of the epi in the US. And just 25 years ago in Europe, we were leading in chips, in semiconductors. Then this industry has been destroyed by financial speculation. So we are not so far in having the possibility to continue to say something. This does not mean that we will be able to bring back all the supply chain of everything, but we have to keep control of the knowledge, of the R&D. This is something that we cannot step back, in my opinion. So we still have 2 minutes for a quick question, if any. If not, I thank you very much. I found it a very nice and interesting section, but I'm the host, and then it's clearly that I found it like so. Okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Merci pour tout et à la prochaine fois.
Non, on a des coordonnées, tout le monde.
C'est ça.